Donald Trump openly, personally, and vehemently denounced Canada this morning through a string of social media insults and an unscheduled press conference. He effectively dared Canada to respond by accusing Mark Carney of being unappreciative and threatening to apply the worst economic sanctions ever on a supposed friend. In a matter of hours, Mark Carney responded with actions rather than words. A coordinated support from 5 partner nations that arrived within 90 minutes of Carney's speech, an immediate set of economic measures targeted at Trump's political base, a devastating 3-layer counterstrike, and a public refutation of Trump's claims with real evidence. By the time Wall Street closed, the markets had made their choice. Carney won. Not even close. But neither the market reaction nor the policy are the real story. The real story is what this discussion revealed about the two leaders. One was offensive, the other had a plan. One improvised during a press briefing, the other employed a preloaded response package that had been wargamed, coordinated with allies, and calibrated in order to maximize political damage at the lowest feasible cost. It wasn't a fair fight. Preparation triumphed over spontaneity in this straight-set match. Warren Buffett's assessment of this exchange contained the harshest critique of leadership throughout the whole trade war. What he stated about the difference between leaders who anticipate and those who react, and the implications of that difference for a country, should be heard by every voter. Subscribe now because this story will change the way you perceive the entire conflict. The day went like this. I want to go over this almost hour by hour since the period is what demonstrates the disparity. This morning at 6:30, Canadian morning television aired a pre-recorded interview with Mark Carney. Within an hour, American networks picked up the segments. Carney calmly discussed Canada's trade diversification efforts, the new bilateral agreements with the EU and Indo-Pacific nations, the energy export infrastructure being built toward Atlantic and Pacific terminals, and the allied partnerships that have transformed Canada's economy in less than 2 years. It was measured, data-driven, and deliberately subtle. The type of interview that would often simply be mentioned in passing on American business channels. However, one line cut through it all. According to Carney, Canada's economic future is no longer hostage to the decisions of any single trading partner. We have built a resilient, diversified, sovereign economy, and we did it in less than 2 years. Hostage, single trading partner. He spoke in a loud voice. According to White House insiders, Donald Trump was watching Fox Business at home when the show aired, when he heard that Canada doesn't need America anymore. He allegedly questioned an assistant who hadn't noticed. "Did you hear what this guy just said about us?" It didn't matter. Trump had already reached for his phone. Around 7:15 a.m., Trump began posting on his blog, 6 posts in 45 minutes. The first called Carney the most unappreciative leader in history and claimed that Canada would be nothing without America. According to the second, Carney was boasting about Canada's decades-long exploitation of the United States on television. The third promised to subject a supposed ally to the harshest economic penalties ever. Posts 4 through 6 turned personal, criticizing Carney's time at Goldman Sachs, calling him a globalist, questioning whether he was genuinely Canadian given his time leading the Bank of England, and claiming that Canada's economy is a disaster that only survives because America allows it. 6 posts in 45 minutes. The president is being pushed farther into a corner by each of them, each whom is more furious and less rational than the one before it. None of these threats had been investigated, assessed, or coordinated with those who would have to carry them out, because every public threat requires a follow-through. He reportedly told his own National Economic Council director about the tweet via a CNN push message on his phone. The Secretary of Commerce found out about it when a reporter contacted to ask for comment. The trading team was unprepared. Nobody in the entire system of American economic administration predicted this because there was nothing to know. It was merely a whim. An individual with a phone logged complaints before his own administration was awake. The press conference ensued. Trump stopped on the White House's South Lawn before heading out for an event at 8 a.m. to broadcast everything he had tweeted live to cameras that would reach every journalist worldwide. He left the posts behind. 3 specific economic statements were made by him.
banking limitations on Canadian financial institutions conducting business in the U.S., an immediate prohibition on Canadian energy imports, and potential USMCA withdrawal procedures. 3 specific threats were made during the live show. They had never talked to the economic team before. None of them were reviewed by the trade policy staff. None of them assessed commercial impact, legal feasibility, or unanticipated consequences. Against this backdrop, one of his top economic advisors was shown, seemingly on the phone in a matter of seconds, trying to ascertain whether the president's unforeseen promises were even legal. Another advisor was sitting with their head in their hands. The Canadian retort was being drafted even before Trump finished his speech, and he unintentionally put himself in this trap. By making explicit threats in public and on camera, Trump committed himself. Trump never backs down, and he would come seen as weak if he did. Carney would soon demonstrate with startling precision that carrying through would lead to the adoption of policies that his own team had not thought of, and that would be far more detrimental to America than to Canada. He had gotten himself in a lose-lose predicament before 9 in the morning, and the other side hadn't even started talking. So there was the call-out. Written on the spur of the moment after seeing a 6:30 a.m. television interview that included specific threats that the president's own economic staff had learned about through news monitoring, it was disorganized, hostile, and personal. The president was put in a position by 3 threats from which he could not escape without jeopardizing his own country or demeaning himself. They were all delivered before most of Washington had had their first cup of coffee. The markets opened at 9:30 a.m., nervous and unpredictable. Energy stocks were highly volatile. The Canadian currency first fell as traders factored in the uncertainty, which is what uncertainty does. People are scared of it, and scared people sell. Trump's followers cited the market reaction as proof that the call-out was successful. As you can see, the Canadian dollar is losing value. They are terrified. But seasoned traders knew this. They were awaiting an answer from the other side, because the degree of hostility in any fight is revealed by the initial move. The counter-move can teach you about strategy. Markets also genuinely price strategy. It was all about Carney's reaction for the next 4.5 hours. Would he be just as hostile? Would he become more combative? Would he concede? Would he try to employ diplomacy to diffuse the situation? Our perception of the entire trade issue changed when the solution was made public. After Trump's attack, Mark Carney said nothing for 4.5 hours, absolutely nothing. No statement made in public, no background calls to reporters, no social media reaction, and no spokesperson briefing. Total silence. There was constant conjecture in the media. Pundits debated whether or not Carney was caught off guard. On all platforms, Trump fans celebrated. Fox News aired a chyron that said, "Canada silent after Trump ultimatum." He is afraid to respond, so conservative analysts declared an early victory. Canada is conscious of its shortcomings. Carney has gone into hiding. This is what happens when a drama teacher's replacement tries to play hardball with the leader of the free world, a Trump supporter declared vehemently on television news. This was a fatal misinterpretation, because the silence was not an indication of uncertainty, but rather staging. Behind the scenes, Carney's staff wasn't arguing over what to do. They were activating what they had previously built. The response package was prepared weeks
before. One of the pre-installed counter-strike protocols designed for this kind of provocation in wargame. Carney's strategy team had identified 6 potential Trump escalation scenarios during preparation talks last month. The third scenario was categorized as an economic danger of an uncoordinated public personal assault. Today was scenario 3. The playbook was already written. The countermeasures were already prepared. The Allies' comments had already been pre-approved. In the 4.5 hours, there were only 3 uses. To make sure their pre-approved remarks were ready for signal release, Allied leaders were approached for final coordination discussions. A
assurance that the economic countermeasures were legally engaged and operationally prepared, as well as timing calibration, because the reaction was supposed to arrive at 12:30 p.m., maximizing the counterattack's market impact when it altered the narrative, but before the trading day ended and after the market had fully factored in the fear and uncertainty caused by Trump's threats. Additionally, the time was intentional. Silence was a weapon in and of itself. At 12:30 p.m., Carney gave a 15-minute speech from the floor of Parliament. Calm, systematic, data-driven, with every claim verified and every line sourced. The total antithesis of Trump's sorrel in every aspect. He undermined each of Trump's three threats with accurate, comprehensive, and independently verifiable economic data, all without once criticizing banking regulations. Carney noted that Canadian financial institutions have $2.4 trillion in global assets and manage over 600 billion cross-border transactions annually. He explained why Canadian banks are an essential component of American banking, with the patience of a lecturer addressing a distressed pupil. Restrictions wouldn't hurt Canada. There would be significant disruptions to the lending markets, mortgage processing, and cross-border business transactions that American businesses depend on a daily basis. Carney pointed out that the United States purchases 60% of its crude oil from Canada, not 20%, 30%, or 60%, in relation to the energy import freeze. He said, "We welcome the president to consult his own banking regulators before making promises his system cannot survive." An import freeze is expected to raise the price of petrol in the United States by $1.40 per gallon within 30 days. He gave the figure the weight of consensus rather than partisanship by citing three independent energy analysts from Wood Mackenzie, the IEA, and Goldman Sachs. He continued, "We encourage the president to explain that arithmetic to American consumers filling up their tanks. Perhaps he can do it at one of his petrol station photo opportunities." On USMCA withdrawal, Carney's legal team had pre-prepared a constitutional analysis showing that withdrawal requires 6 months' notice in direct congressional involvement under Article 34.6 of the agreement. The president cannot withdraw by executive order, by press conference, or by social media post, Carney said. "We know this is the case. Every response was well-written, exact, and devastating, and if he misplaced it, we would be happy to give him a copy." Carney said nothing. He did not personally denigrate Trump. He did not exhibit the same level of hostility. In a trade war, he used figures, which are more damaging than insults. Alongside the speech, Canada imposed specific economic restrictions rather than generic reprisal tariffs. Those blunt instruments hurt everyone, even the country that uses them. These were painstakingly created with the cold precision of a central banker who devoted his career to identifying the exact locations of pressure points in a financial system. First, there should be an immediate halt to the facilitation of potash shipments to 6 agricultural states in the United States: Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Indiana, Missouri, Ohio. And Canada supply about 30% of the world's marijuana, which is essential for American crops to thrive. Without potash, maize yields drop by 30 to 40%. The economic feasibility of soybeans declines. The timing was deliberate. During the pre-planting season, farmers arranged their yearly fertilizer orders. The states were deliberate. In a matter of hours, their phone lines would light up. Republican senators from agricultural heartland states would immediately feel the pressure, and their constituents would be standing at empty shelves in farm supply stores, asking pointed questions about the trade war they had been told was being won. Second, capacity allocation evaluations would prioritize Pacific and Atlantic export commitments above flows into the United States, as 3 major pipeline operators were publicly told. This was not a major announcement, it was paperwork, the kind of muted operational signal that energy markets quickly decipher and modify prices in reaction to. Many American refineries that rely on Canadian heavy crude, mostly in the Midwest and Gulf Coast, were immediately worried about medium-term supplies. The action did not stop the flow of oil. It achieved a more tastefully calculated goal. It forced American energy companies to take supply unpredictability into consideration, which increased costs, raised consumer prices, and put pressure on lawmakers. Third, explicit directions were issued to Canadian institutional investors and pension funds to accelerate what Ottawa calls sovereign risk diversification, a nice bureaucratic euphemism for shifting Canadian funds from American markets to other markets. The U.S. bond and equity markets depend on approximately $400 billion in consistent, long-term institutional funding from European, Asian, and Commonwealth markets for stability and liquidity. The capital does not vanish overnight, but the signal does, and markets respond to signals. Carney did not exact widespread retribution. He got his retribution. Every action was targeted toward a political group that Trump needed. Every measure was painful in districts that lean Republican. Instead of punishing Canada's opponents, every move was meant to force them to demand that their own leaders deal with the problem. That's the difference between retaliation and planning. Anger is a kind of revenge. One tactic is to make the folks on the other side do your work. Then came the coalition. This part demonstrates the depth of what Carney has created. Within 90 minutes of Carney's address, 5 allied leaders issued coordinated public statements. The United Kingdom noted that Canada's balanced approach stands in stark contrast to Washington's aggressive statements. Japan reaffirmed legally binding commitments with Canada and expressed worry among allies about unilateral economic threats. The European Union emphasized the notion that trade disputes should be resolved through established processes and negotiation, rather than threats and social media ultimatums. Australia reaffirmed its strategic partnership with Canada and its dedication to rules-based international trade. South Korea expressed serious worries about unjustified economic threats against partners and reiterated its own trade agreements with Ottawa. 5 allies, 5 statements, and 90 minutes, all of which were critical of the U.S. and in favor of Canada. That kind of real-time coordination is not feasible. It doesn't happen by itself. 5 chiefs of state cannot agree on lunch in 90 minutes, much less issue precise diplomatic statements. Carney's team called those leaders days or weeks before Trump called out, saying, "When this happens, and it will happen, here's what we need from you. Here's your pre-approved language. Here's the timeline. Wait for our signal." 5 governments were ready when the signal came at 12:30 p.m. The cry-out isolated America rather than Canada. Trump tried to paint Canada as weak by openly attacking them. Within hours, 5 nations openly sided with Canada against the United States. The diplomatic maths proved to be devastating. 1 nation stands by itself and yells, while 6 nations stand together and speak calmly. Trump thought he was stirring up trouble. He was getting close to an ambush. Carney had been waiting for this call, had organized the allies, loaded the countermeasures, planned the event, and prepared the response. All he needed from Trump was the trigger, and Trump delivered it at precisely 7:15 a.m. Has a phone and a grudge. Once you realize that Carney was waiting and that every element of the counterattack was ready to go, the
entire exchange takes on a deeper meaning. Go back to the start and think about how each side contributed to the dispute. Trump made 6 rash posts on social media. Carney provided a 247-page economic impact analysis with pre-written responses to all potential threats posed by Trump. Trump made 3 unconfirmed threats on live television. Carney offered 3 surgical remedies that had been tested for second-order effects, approved by legal counsel, permitted by the cabinet, and evaluated by economists. Trump vented his fury. Carney gathered 5 allied nations with pre-approved remarks in anticipation of a signal. Trump was carrying a phone. Carney had a scheme. The mismatch between impulse and preparation, between reaction and foresight, and between volume and precision is not unique to this particular day. It narrates the story of this entire trade dispute. And now, for the first time, everyone on the Earth could see that asymmetry in a single 12-hour period.
There was no ambiguity, no spin to conceal it, and no narrative to alter its meaning. One side was angry, while the other was ready. And the senators, the market, the allies, and the historians all noticed the same thing. I'll put this in perspective. Trump issued a financial warning at 8 in the morning. Carney's staff had simulated the impact of banking limitations 3 weeks earlier. Since Canadian financial institutions are so embedded in American markets, they knew that curbs would hurt American lending, mortgage processing, and business transactions more than Canadian banks. The estimate of $2.4 trillion was prepared. The volume of cross-border transactions was prepared. The names of the American industries that will be impacted were included in their creation. When Trump made the threat, Carney's team didn't need to look into it. They opened the Energy Import Freeze Threat folder. Carney's Ministry of Energy completed the supply models months ago. The 60% dependency rate was known to them. They knew how it affected the price per gallon. The 3 independent energy analysts had been contacted, and their permission to use their particular estimations had been acquired. When Trump threatened to put a freeze on Canadian energy imports, Carney's team did not act quickly to obtain details. It was removed off a shelf. The risk of a USMCA withdrawal. Carney's legal team had prepared a 14-page constitutional analysis before Trump had mentioned the withdrawal process. They knew that Congress needed to intervene. They knew there was a 6-month notice period. They were familiar with the automatic reversion clauses. They even had the exact article number, 34.6, ready for the camera. Every single response was pre-packaged, pre-researched, and pre-verified. This level of readiness is not accidental. It happens when a leader takes their profession seriously enough to anticipate future occurrences and create the tools required to deal with them before a crisis materializes. It also draws attention to a troubling feature of the opposing side. If your threats can be pre-rebutted, they are predictable. Furthermore, it shows that you are reacting rather than thinking if your threats are predictable. Moreover, a leader is reactive if they have already lost a strategic conflict. They just don't know about it yet. Following that, Warren Buffett offered what may have been the most critical assessment of the president's skills throughout the entire trade battle. Not the most dramatic, not the loudest, and not the most destructive. Drama is not Buffett's specialty. He is employed in the evaluation field. In addition, his analysis of the current events was more comprehensive than any political study. At a Berkshire Hathaway shareholders event that evening, Buffett started his address with a principle that he has used to all of his 70 years of investing. After evaluating companies for 70 years, he said, I've learned one thing that applies to every business, every investment, and every leader. Preparation is the single most reliable indicator of competence. If a CEO walks into an earnings call with answers for questions that haven't been asked yet, I am confident. When a CEO shows up and acts on the spur of the moment, I am anxious. And I am nervous for a reason, because in high-stakes situations,
improvisation does not equate to inventiveness. It's a lack of preparedness. Furthermore, in both government and business, being unprepared always has a cost. The only question is how much the bill is. He paused. Then he mentioned the cue that every financial outlet will use by morning. I saw one leader improvise today while another prepared, and the outcome was entirely predictable since it is always the same. Being ready wins out. It is the norm in boardrooms. It is successful in markets. Additionally, it was dominant today in terms of international relations. Then Buffett strode around the exchange with the meticulous accuracy of an investor evaluating managerial quality, something he had done better than anyone living for his entire career. The president made 3 different economic threats this morning on live television. None of them had been assessed by his economic staff. None had been assessed for legal feasibility. None had been made to take market impact or unanticipated results into consideration. The threat of leaving the USMCA is one of them, and it is not even within the president's unilateral authority. Without properly checking, he issued an unlawful threat in front of everyone on television. In response, the Canadian Prime Minister arranged 5 allies to release statements in support within 90 minutes, launched targeted economic steps in a couple of hours, and employed precise, independently confirmed facts to address each threat. Getting that level of collaboration requires weeks of preparation. This seems that before this morning, Carney's staff had identified this exact circumstance, devised a response, secured allied commitments, and planned the financial actions, all before to Trump's awakening. One leader started posting as soon as he got up, furious. The other leader had been getting ready for this event for weeks. The market saw the change right away. One was valued as a risk, and the other as an asset, since, in my experience, risk is usually more expensive than preparation. He wasn't finished yet. Buffett went on to describe the more comprehensive assessment of the market that this conversation disclosed. Markets are the most trustworthy arbiters in the world. They have no political affiliation. They are not devoted. They don't care about insults, bravado, or posts on social media. Competence is assessed and valued. These days, they assessed 2 leaders, one based on intuition and the other on planning, and determined their prices accordingly. The Canadian currency gained value. American farm futures increased in the targeted states. Stocks related to energy fell. Financial stocks saw a decrease in value. The market could decide the winner without the help of pundits. The market knew by 2 o'clock. At the conclusion of the trade, the numbers validated every assertion made by Buffett. The Canadian currency gained value relative to the US dollar for the first time in weeks. American farm futures experienced a significant rise in each of the 6 states where the cannabis hash limitations were put into place. The unpredictability of the fertilizer supply has led to an increase in wheat, corn, and soybeans. Energy stocks fell as refineries priced in medium-term supply risk following the announcement of pipeline redirection. American banks' equities fell as a result of the institutional capital outflow guidance. As the S&P 500 closed, trade-sensitive industries dominated the overall decline. When Carney responded, the White House became silent. There was no follow-up post, no escalation, no press briefing, no attempt to walk them back, and no justification for the threats of the morning. Advisors seemed to be in full damage management mode throughout the day, assessing whether Trump's warning threats are legal, what may happen to the market if they were implemented, how to handle the agricultural impact in 6 states at once, and how to backtrack on some statements made on live television. The morning was noisy, but the afternoon was silent. Furthermore, it is hardly a sign of diplomatic strength to keep silent in the face of provocation. It's the sound of a group of people understanding their leader has made commitments and promises they can't keep. Republican senators from the 6 states. Carney's potash restrictions targeted were on the phone by mid-afternoon. Iowa senators called for prompt communication to resolve agricultural supply issues. The Nebraskan senator spoke on how important it is for American farmers to have a steady supply of fertilizer. Carney's targeting was successful. The Kansas senator was said to be the most blunt, telling a White House liaison, "My farmers can't plant without fertilizer. Fix this or I'm going public." What the hell just happened and why weren't we warned is the diplomatic way of saying that the Ohio senator requested a comprehensive briefing on the trade ramifications of this morning's developments. Rather than supporting the trade war or the president's morning threats, Republican senators called the White House within hours after the counterattack, demanding that the White House make amends for the damage the call-out had caused. Potato restrictions threatened more than just trade data. Real livelihoods, real planting seasons, real crop yields, and real districts with real senators up for re-election were all at risk. Trump's unintentional provocation did more than just backfire internationally. It created an internal political problem among his alliance, which his own allies insisted he address. The read was immediate and disastrous on a worldwide level. Diplomats and foreign policy specialists from around the globe witnessed in real time the contrast between Canada's prompt and well-thought-out response and the recklessness and incoherence of the American provocation. The exchange raised Canada's profile in ways that years of traditional diplomacy could not have. It will take years to undo the harm it caused to America's reputation. A 12-hour leadership and case study was recently shown to every government on the planet. One leader acted impulsively and was only motivated by volume. The other relied on preparation, supported by data, allies, and pre-built countermeasures. The international community also reached a clear conclusion about who to trust when it came to significant, legally binding long-term economic agreements. If you were the EU negotiating a trade framework, which leader would you prefer to be on the opposing side of the table? If you were Japan distributing investment funds, which country's promises would you believe? The answers write themselves. And Buffett said as much. Every American voter should be awake at night because of this. I'm not as concerned about the exchange itself as I am about what it reveals about American governance. When the leader of the world's largest economy makes policy through social media posts, and when specific, consequential economic threats are made on the spur of the moment, without review, analysis, or coordination, the nation's credibility as a serious negotiating partner is destroyed. Not just with Canada, but with every country, investor, and organization that needs to trust that American commitments are reliable and thoughtful. He added, Carney's preparation didn't just win the day, it exposed the absence of preparation on the other side, and that exposure is visible to every government and every investor in the world. You can't unring that bell. Every nation now knows that American economic threats may be made on impulse by one person watching television with no review, no analysis, and no institutional backing. That knowledge changes how every country on Earth deals with the United States, and that change doesn't go away when the news cycle moves on. So here's the full picture of what happened in a single day. This morning, Donald Trump woke up, saw something on television that made him angry, and decided to call out an entire nation. He posted 6 times in 45 minutes. He made 3 specific economic threats on live television that his own team hadn't reviewed, his own economists hadn't modeled, and his own lawyers hadn't assessed for legal feasibility. He backed himself into a corner where following through would hurt America more than Canada, and backing down would make him look weak. His own National Economic Council director found out from a CNN push notification. By lunchtime, Mark Carney had dismantled every threat with independently verified data from 3 international sources.
Separate analytical firms. He'd activated surgical economic countermeasures targeting Trump's political base in 6 agricultural states during pre-planning season. He'd coordinated 5 allied nations to publicly criticize the United States and endorse Canada's position, all landing within 90 minutes. By close of trading, markets had declared a winner. By mid-afternoon, Republican senators from targeted states were calling the White House demanding damage control. By evening, Warren Buffett had delivered the verdict. One leader was priced as an asset, one as a risk. And by nightfall, every government on Earth had recalibrated its assessment of American reliability. This exchange wasn't about tariffs or trade policy or even the U.S.-Canada relationship in isolation. It was a demonstration of something more fundamental, the difference between leading by impulse and leading by preparation. Trump's call-out was designed to project strength. Instead, it exposed vulnerability. The vulnerability of a leader who makes policy on television without consulting the people who have to implement it, without assessing consequences, without considering that the other side might already be positioned and waiting. Carney's counterstrike was designed to demonstrate exactly one thing, that Canada had anticipated this, prepared for this, and was better positioned for this confrontation than the country that started it.
That demonstration succeeded completely. Not because Canada is bigger, not because Canada is stronger economically, but because one side treated governance like a strategic discipline and the other side treated it like a social media platform. The trade war has been framed as a contest of economic power. Today, it was revealed as a contest of competence, and competence won. Buffett put it as simply as anyone could. Preparation is a signal. Impulse is a signal. Markets read both. Today, the market read both and priced them accordingly. This morning, Donald Trump woke up angry, reached for his phone, and started a fight with a country that had been waiting for exactly that phone call, waiting with data, waiting with countermeasures, waiting with 5 allied nations holding pre-approved statements, waiting with surgical economic actions calibrated to hit the exact constituencies that would cause maximum political pain. Impulse starts fights. Preparation wins them. The next time Trump reaches for his phone at 7 a.m., the question isn't whether Carney will be ready. The question is whether Carney has already built the response for that one too. Based on today, the answer is